Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns. And here we are, Season 7, Episode number 6. We're going to see how 6 turns out, because I think we talked about we don't necessarily like the number 6.
Well, I mean, the number 6 is unique in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we've talked a lot of times when it comes to numbers, I refer to a prior life sitting around a craps table. And, hard 6 is 2 3s put together.
Right.
That makes the number appealing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to win the hard 6 bet.
Yeah.
The other thing about 6 is I've made plenty of money rolling boxcars. And so, 2 6s equal 12,
Mm-hmm.
and 12 is divisible by 3 times 4. We know all of what we've learned about the number 4.
Right.
And so, very interestingly, when I think of the number 6, because of my bibliological background, number 6 has always meant it's the number for man.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't realize until Google helped me out
Yeah.
on this, whatever day of my 55th year on this round little marble,
Right.
is that man was created on the 6th day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why 6 is numbered to the number of man, where 7 is typically the number for God.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, everyone else looks at the number 6 as a symbol of completeness.
Yeah.
Pythagoreans acknowledge the number 6 to be the first perfect number.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's kind of strange.
Yeah. And the other thing is, in numerology, the symbolism, 6 is the number of domestic happiness, harmony, and stability, which is unique from one family to another, as it says. But I think what it could lead into is that there is another number meaning, which says that 6 has several meanings, including wealth and material goods. So, I don't know. The number 6. This episode is brought to you by the number 6.
Right. And as we mentioned before, I mean, we talked about, we haven't done this on prior seasons where we've actually looked at the numbers. So,
Yeah.
And chances are we won't again. So it's always something that, you never know what happens.
It's unique to the season.
Right.
Now, what I really like about Season 7, Episode 6, is it takes us to 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's like a heyday of time in American history that is just really kind of cool. 76.
Yeah, what happened in 1976?
Lots of things.
I was not alive to see it, so
Oh, my word.
a couple of years later.
Well, I think, 1976 was the bicentennial of the United States.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Another major event was Jimmy Carter defeated the incumbent president, Gerald Ford, in the presidential election.
Yeah.
The incorporation of the Apple Computer Company
Mm-hmm.
and Microsoft. Yeah. So, 1976. Now, of course, that means just because you weren't birthed
Yeah.
doesn't mean you weren't alive.
Yeah. I mean, that could be true.
Now people are just like, really? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Let's see. Super Bowl 10 was in 76. So the Steelers defeated the Cowboys 21-17.
Mm-hmm.
It says at the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. I thought the Orange Bowl was college football. Is the Orange Bowl an actual place too? I guess.
I thought it was college football.
Yeah. The Miami Orange Bowl was an outdoor athletic stadium in Miami, Florida from 1937 till 2008. So apparently it wasn't just a bowl game that was called the Orange Bowl. Now it's probably just the Orange Bowl that continues on, but apparently it was a location, and that's where the Super Bowl 10 was held.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, I was... it's funny how it said on January 14th, there was the Lutz family flees from 112 Ocean Ave in Amityville, Long Island, New York, 20 days after moving in on December 18th, inspiring the Amityville horrors.
Yeah, there you go.
And that it just the association. We watched the first Conjuring. Have you ever heard of the Conjurings? Have you watched it?
You know the answer to this question. I have not watched The Conjuring, and I've heard of the franchise, but it's not my thing.
Yeah, and it's not usually something that I would watch. Or I mean, like,
sure,
Heather doesn't like it, so then therefore I'm usually don't watch anything in that realm either. But Tyson actually wanted to watch something with us, and and he's been watching like all of these horror films. So
yeah,
he was in film class, and he just watched the original Night of the Living Dead.
Okay,
and he's like, so I mean, he's been in this realm of trying to look through this, and I told him that the Conjuring was actually written by Christian people. Right, so it's based on this couple, which I'm trying to remember their names now. It's The Conjuring's a 2013 film. Right, so it's Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Okay.
So they were the first non-ordained demonologists recognized by the Catholic Church.
Huh.
So they were religious, right? They were religiously associated, but these two apparently had, like, they would be called into somebody's home that was almost like the original ghost hunters kind of thing. Somebody would say, "Hey, our place is haunted."
Sure.
And if they had some kind of association, they would be calling in the Warrens. So apparently Lorraine is I think what they call sensitive, not just like the
right. Yeah, not snowflake,
right,
but in the spirit realm.
Yes.
Okay.
And so then Ed would be more familiar with a lot of the rituals and things like that.
Wow.
So they would call, and most of the time they would walk in and like, yep, here's the explanation for it. It's because of this, and you're not haunted. Like, It's fine, move on.
Right.
So The Conjuring was then based on a family, I was trying to remember their names, but they had situations that were going on in their house. Things were, like some witch way back when, and there was some, things that happened because of, and they identified it, and then they, of course, now they made a movie. But there's things that are associated with these two, and I believe the Amityville horrors were also investigated by the Warrens. So just that tie-in from 1976, the Warrens were there to be able to investigate.
Wow.
these houses that, ended up, there was some kind of haunting situations going on.
Yeah.
And it was in The Conjuring that they actually performed the exorcism, even though they weren't supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they were investigators, and then they would bring in the priest to do the exorcism. But,
okay. And there's a special unit in the Catholic Church for exorcism, right?
I believe so. I think that there's definitely people who are in that realm that do those things.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll leave it to whoever wants. Because I'm not a big fan of it. Like I don't like to deal with that realm.
Right. I think since we're on this topic, and I'll just throw you a curveball.
Okay.
In regards to, since we talk tongue in cheek about different topics, but Luther, back in the day, he must have believed in the indwelling of evil, because in the confession of the baptism, there is, do you denounce the devil in all his wicked ways?
Yeah.
And so there's a verbal denunciation.
Right.
And since it's, as a friend of mine would say, baptism by proxy, in lieu of, since the baby can't answer,
right,
then the sponsors answer that they do.
Right.
And so I'm not sure if that's a dual-esque renunciation. Like, so then even the sponsors are like, we do. Oh, do you?
Yeah, and I think that this idea, these things that they've been happening for quite some time, which is you bring in Luther, in that, because yes, that baptism rite was like, we need to exorcise any demons that could be in this infant or child,
right?
Like we're not gonna play, like we're gonna exorcise the child. Because it could be full, we don't even know.
Yeah, so you got these swirling little shadow demons going around, and then lady gives birth, and they're like, "Oh, a free island!" Bam, in comes the demon.
Yeah.
And so when you say we're going to exorcise these demons, that does not mean treadmill them.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't mean making them fit.
Oh, are we entertaining ourselves right now?
I think so.
Yeah. There are people who are like, oh my gosh, you both just lost your salvation.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we usually don't, we've talked about it before. We usually don't dabble in that realm.
No, we just stay away. Right. I think that in essence should show, anyone who's listening, that we have a healthy respect for the unseen world.
Yeah.
Period. Boom. All right. Next topic.
We're moving right along, everybody. We're gonna skip right on to the next.
So you weren't alive in 1976.
No,
and
not that I know of, at least.
Well, yeah, fair point and well taken. In 1976, if I do the math real quick, yeah, I was like 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was 9 years old. I remember I have a very distinct memory of being on the curb for a bicentennial parade.
Yeah.
And my heart was full of nationalism.
Yeah.
The celebration of the 200th anniversary of the United States took place, and there were a lot of things that occurred around that celebration. One of the fun facts that I thought was really interesting is that George Washington was posthumously promoted to the rank of a 6-star general because of the bicentennial celebration. All quarters minted in 76 were dated 1776 to 1976. And I think this fits in with our Fringe episode. NASA's Viking 1 lander spacecraft arrived safely on Mars and was the first American spacecraft to ever touch the surface of Mars. So, I mean, when we're talking about aliens,
Right.
how do you not talk about Martians?
Yep.
Especially when it was in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Looney Tunes. Yeah, so, and another thing along this line of how the government's involved, the U.S. Treasury reintroduced the $2 bill.
In 1776.
Yeah.
So when did it go away prior to that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know any of the rest of it.
Well, I mean, I know there's still, I mean, I think they still have $2 bills in circulation, right? I mean, I don't know if they're still printing them. Maybe they are. I guess they would be if they're...
No, I think is the $2 bill discontinued. I think that they stopped. Oh, no, it's still being made.
Oh.
It's still being made. They discontinued the bill in 1966. So it costs the same to print the $2 bill as it does to print the $1 note. So printing a $2 bill makes more sense.
Guess it'd be more valuable then, at least $1 more.
I think along these lines, how much does it cost to make a penny? It costs 2.1 cents to make a penny to be able to go into circulation.
That's crazy.
Oh my gosh. It only costs 17 cents to make a $100 bill. Now we're going to talk about dollar cost averaging.
So when are they going to stop making the penny then? I mean, if it's costing more to make it than it is to its value, wouldn't that be the reason why you'd say, hey, like, let's take that out of circulation?
It's a fiat system anyway. So none of it's worth. Maybe the point is that a $100 bill really is only worth 17 cents. You know, we're just exchanging these symbols of what money is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not backed by gold. And we just keep printing more. And China keeps buying our bonds.
Yep.
And so, I don't know when the year comes that the United States becomes Greece. Greece is the word, is the word, is the word. So the other thing I wanted to bring out, 76 reminds me of the Philadelphia 76ers. And you probably didn't see Dr. J play live.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen footage now, but not.
Yeah. I mean, just incredible game changer to the game of basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at highest grossing films of 1976.
Well, I saw who won the Oscar. One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
In 76?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't even have that on the list.
It didn't gross a lot of films, but it won Oscar for Best Picture.
Oh, because it says that the Academy Award for Best Picture was Rocky.
Huh. Well, now we're going to have that discussion.
Right.
In 1976, a Big Mac cost 75 cents.
Oh, it's because the BAFTA awards, I don't know what the difference is between a BAFTA and an Academy Award. One's an Oscar, one's what is the BAFTA?
I don't know.
Because the BAFTA award was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Okay.
In the Academy Award, which I think is an Oscar, is Rocky.
Okay.
But, yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
The average family income was $16,000 in 1976.
Wow.
A new house cost $43,000. And the retail price for a gallon of gas averaged 59 cents a gallon. See, and this is where my memory does serve me correct, because I remember gas in the mid 60s, like 65 cents. Jimmy Carter coming into office, we also were headed into a national gas shortage.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember them having odd days, even days in Michigan, where if you could get gas, but you did it on rotation. So if the end of your plate number was even,
Yeah.
you got, it was even and odd. So it was alternating.
Wow.
And in California, it was a mess. Major lines.
I think I remember seeing the pictures of that now that you mentioned that, the shortage.
Yep.
I was seeing so it's 76, Star Wars started shooting, right?
Yeah.
This is a significant one, even though it doesn't really make sense that it would be significant. April 1st, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Have you seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
So I think technically I should have.
Yeah.
Meaning that,
It's a weird movie.
yeah, it's a very cult-like following.
It's a very cultish.
Yes.
But it was re-released as a midnight show. And why it's significant, because it actually has continued to be shown in theaters like on a consistent basis through 2013, which is like it's the longest running show in the theaters apparently.
Yeah.
So like on a consistent basis. So that's it's a weird show. I showed Tyson and Heather one night. They're like, yeah.
Yeah.
You ignorant slut.
See, I don't even get that.
Right.
Yeah.
Janet.
But another fun fact is in Des Moines, they are doing a Broadway show of the Rocky Horror is being cast. And Madison Ray, gentleman that I've worked with in the past as far as a musician with his groups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think he's in it or is a part of the cast and is working on bringing that to Des Moines.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
I don't know if it's not a Broadway show if it's not on Broadway, but
Right.
a live theatrical version of said movie.
Yeah.
Bringing back all the feels, good memories, TV shows from 76, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, MASH, and Charlie's Angels. Those
are some classics.
They are classics, and if you didn't see them during that, then, well, you've probably seen the reruns.
Yep. Again, probably didn't watch them live in 76 that I know of. But I did see reruns.
Yeah. And favorite foods, cool foods, and beverage trends: carrot cake, crepes, and number 3, deviled eggs.
Again,
Yeah,
they made the list.
well, we are in the decade of the 70s, and so there's not a huge move there.
Let's see. The World Series in 1976. Cincinnati Reds and the Yankees. The Reds swept the series in 4 games to repeat as champions, avenging their 1939 and 1961 World Series losses to the Yankees.
My guess is Johnny Bench was playing for the Reds.
Johnny Bench was playing for the Reds.
Yep.
Mhm.
Speaking of the craps table, that gentleman liked to gamble.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, 76, I don't know. I think there's just part of it. Maybe I like 76 because it's an inversion of the year that I was born, 67.
Maybe.
It could be.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in listener land, how you doing out there?
Yeah.
As we meander through.
We're just going through 1976, the number 6, and all of its iterations. So that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Yep. So we spent a little bit of time dealing with demons. But this time, at least, we have not had our ATEM shut down. Our cameras are still functioning. The sound bar is still jumping. So we're at least in that spot where nothing has been brought in from the outside, affecting our equipment.
No doom to gloom.
Right.
Yeah. Fed raised rates again, and this week, and we're seeing the 30-year fixed rate slide into a very consistent, just below 7.5% at 7.325.
Yeah. So does this mean that
It's coming more.
savings accounts, like where that interest rate for those are also on the rise? So
Absolutely.
putting some money elsewhere if you're looking at a safety, where those things will be a little bit more stable of an investment as well.
Yeah. But just remember that really your best return on your money is to pay off your credit cards. Because you're not going to get 26% or 18% in a bank. So if you're like, I'm going to save some money. Well, if you're carrying credit card debt, no, you're not.
You're not saving anything.
And so get that credit card debt paid off. And, and like it was interesting. I heard on an article about the low mortgage rates that we've seen in the past few years, about how I think it was Kai Risdell on national radio was talking about how people, even though it did cost money for mortgages, people considered it free money in comparison to what other money costs.
Yeah.
And so, but there was a gentleman who paid off his mortgage, and people are like, why are you doing that? It's like free money. And he's like, you know what? Peace of mind. He's like, it was peace of mind. He goes, I don't have to worry about having to do whatever I need to do. I get to live my life accordingly because I don't have a mortgage. And so anyway.
Yeah.
And that was actually a driving factor for why we bought a house, is because getting out of the rental situation allowed us to move into a price bracket where, based on job changes, it was feasible. It was doable. You didn't have to look for a job in a certain bracket to be able to afford to live in the rental unit, kind of thing. And so, and
there's tax breaks for, you can count your mortgage, interest or mortgage. I mean, it's like all of that stuff can go towards reducing your taxable income.
Yeah,
So
it's true, and I'm not against that.
yeah,
But the reality is that if you're not paying a mortgage, pay the taxes. Probably the taxes you pay in a year, like what it's quote unquote saving you.
yeah,
If you're not spending the money, what's the big deal?
yeah.
It's
It's true.
trying to keep money from the government.
Big deal.
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
So, guilty pleasures.
Yeah.
I have been watching Storage Wars.
Oh,
It just as a break,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. As I'm unpacking boxes, and I'm thinking, man, if I would have left this in the storage unit, somebody else could have bought it.
I did start watching Alone, finally, whatever the latest season that was on Netflix. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to me, it is fascinating. I'm like, I could never do that. So it's like, I mean, so it's kind of like a look in. Like, I mean, it's fascinating, like what the toll it takes on people.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Well, so what's interesting is having experience with starvation and the studies that are out there.
Yeah.
There were very specific studies, World War II, based on, because it was World War II, was German Nazi Germany. Yeah. About the effects of starvation, what happens to the mind.
Yeah.
And then, like, even after that point, getting healthy
Yeah.
and that taking place over time. There was one season, it's not the season you're watching. There was an Inuit lady on there.
Yeah.
And it took her 6 months to recover from the point of starvation that she had been to in this thing. But there are things that happen in the mind that are not reversible. And so even from my knowledge of the studies about that and about starvation, I wouldn't even subject myself to it. I don't care if it's $500,000.
Yeah, because you're talking, and it's funny, you mentioned the starvation experiment. So, like, it was in Minnesota, and actually the people that they got to be a part of that study were conscientious objectors. So they were saying, we don't want to have to be forced to serve in the war because we're either pacifists or whatever. But taking part of this starvation experiment, they were still serving their government or whatever. But like the depths, I mean, they were the things that they had to go through in this starvation experiment. It wasn't just like, hey, you're not going to eat much. Like, they were putting them through like workout routines. So like you were working out and so like your deficit was even pushed to the limit.
Sure.
So it wasn't even just, hey, we're going to reduce your food intake. It's also like, we're also going to increase your calorie burns. So like you're burning calories, but you're not also filling those in. I mean, there was some interesting stuff on that whole starvation experiment that occurred. And pointing back to, if people want to learn more, there's I think it was the latest season of the Revisionist History podcast, Malcolm Gladwell, which chances are he's probably going to end up writing a book about it, because that's what he did with his latest book, the Bombardier Crew or something.
Yeah.
That's his last book, and just the year before that he was writing. He did the episodes on his podcast about it, which led him to then write the book.
So basically, he's using the podcast as an insight into all the research that he's doing for
I think so.
the books that he's writing.
Yeah.
It would be a multiplication. Like, talk about efficiency.
Yeah.
And we talked about having artificial intelligence
Right.
take our verbalizations of
Right.
our lack of study and turning that into a book, or at least we could release it based on topics and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, but we don't study at all.
No. I mean, we do study right now.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
no.
like it's an insight into our slow typing into the computer. But yeah, I mean,
But
like
I think,
you,
and that's even his. So Malcolm, especially in that, who kind of took the audio book was the thing that was going to be the thing that you should be looking at in that, because his audio book was where he was adding different voices, the voices of the people who he was interviewing, whatever it might be. There's more of this almost interactive version of an audio book than just somebody reading the book.
yeah.
And so that even transformed into that. But he went through this last one. I think it was like 3 episodes of the last series was all about the starvation experiments in Minnesota.
Yeah, and 44 is when that happened.
Yeah.
36 men were selected from more than 200 volunteers.
Yeah.
And they were housed in the corridors and rooms of the University of Minnesota football stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah, Minnesota study.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Male, single, and demonstrated good physical and mental health.
Right. Yeah, so that just led me into, I mean, so understanding starvation, yeah, its effect on you is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's long lasting. So like even after you're stopping the starving, because I think the idea of the study in the first place was like, so what happens after a war-torn country that's going to have limited resources? How are people going to still be fed? What's the effect then going out of war into these, or third world nations that are having resource issues in the first place? Like what's the long cause of these starvation pieces? And I think that was the reason for it, even though this was like forced starvation. But I think there's a lot that they learned through that.
Yeah.
And even, parts that you couldn't run that experiment anymore today. Like
Right.
the depth, that sends people into
Yeah.
some madness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that after watching 3 seasons of Alone,
Yeah.
because I think season 4 is queued up in my queue. So I think technically I watched 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Because I watched the newest one that was released and then dove back in, but I got enough. I was like, it doesn't matter if they're going to South America instead of being, off some island of Vancouver or wherever. I was like, no, this is self-harm. Like I know that they're survivalists and they're in great pursuit, and they're putting them in situations where there is food to be had if they figure out how to get the food.
Right.
But wow, it's and actually one of the priorities when they come and do checkups is they're measuring for if they've lost greater than 25% of their body weight, which is a part of this hunger study.
Yeah.
Was what the goal was, is to get them to that place. And
Yeah.
I mean, just not a healthy place. In regards to that. So, I mean, while I found it fascinating from an explorer's out in nature, surrounded by this vastness of, but then, and that was, man, I just really identified too concerning isolationism, which I think we kind of tongue in cheek talked about why Halloween is so celebrated is because people who wear masks every day get to actually put on the costume of their choice to be able to play for Halloween. I think that there's another part of the human experience which shows that isolation is a major part of our existence,
Right.
whether we want to admit that or not. And so as we've talked about in the past, the importance of community, we've also put the emphasis on that in our current day. There's not, like, you have to work at being involved in community, because building and trying to find community is not readily available. And so certainly it showed in the suburbs of Des Moines, Iowa, when they built houses where you could just drive your car up into the garage and go into your home. You know, that's where there's like this really beautiful thing of the farmhouse with the farmhouse porch. And, you know, and the neighbors could come together and sit on the porch, and whether it's drinking tea or lemonade, and, you know, the instruments would come out, and there'd be, you know, the folklore of folk song, you know, coming together. But yeah, it takes work. And then, you know, Amy and I have been talking about how much relationship oftentimes is driven by work. You know, that the people that you are involved in, the lives and stuff like that, you know, can encircle and be the circle of what relationships do you have that aren't work related, you know? And then, okay, so then when your work is the church, how does that play, you know, into, and this sense of, you know, I think there's another question of the greater community. And so I know that you and Heather are very active in the community at large. And that's something that, are you still coaching soccer?
No, last Saturday was my last game. So.
I just wanted to bring, I wanted to bring closure for people who are wondering how your coaching career went.
I have one closing party that I have to attend, like I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that. It's a closing party, but I'm like, so that'll, but then they said, hey, do you want to coach girls soccer in the spring? And so, I mean, maybe it's not done. And it might be more enjoyable to coach girls soccer versus boys soccer. I don't know. We'll see.
The level of enjoyment for coaching soccer for me is below the median line.
But going back to, skipping the coaching scene, but like the alone part and isolation. I mean, because some people look at that in terms of like personality types. And, you know, you get an introvert who, you know, gets charged up by kind of finding that time away from people. And then you get juiced up and you're like, okay, now I can spend time with people. But I think that show also kind of shows an aspect where many of these survivalists were people that said, I don't mind being alone. But then there's still, like, there's a moment, like, I don't want to be by myself right now. Like, so there is no, and this isn't just dependent upon personality types then. It's not like, hey, I'm an extrovert, I love being around people, and now I'm alone and I don't know what to do. Like, yep. But even as an introverts that were on the show that normally are not spending time with a lot of people are still finding, like, I have to be connected with something else. Like, I need another body, you know, to be able to be around. And I think it just highlights that aspect of, like, we have to kind of, I mean, and part of humanity is, no matter how much we like to complain about humanity, there's still something about connection. that we're going to miss out on if we're trying to just isolate.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it was really interesting to see in watching these people in their lives, stereotypically, men would move into a season of remorse for the things that they had failed their family at. Business-driven men who were like, man, I just realized what I've left behind. And then coming to a place of, this is going to change my relationships and interaction because I know how important this is.
Yeah.
It really, anybody who won of the 4 seasons that I watched came back to this end cap of summary, just talking about how important the people in their lives were,
Right.
and that they were made for being. And so there's where, we're not limited to, I'm an analog guy. And so when I think of relationship, it's face-to-face time, but really it shows that relationship and staying connected. And so maybe there's a different word that might grab us for season 8, and we can dive into the different branches of connectivity.
Yeah.
Versus community. And what does that mean? Because community, whether it's community at large, small group, in a small circle of relationship building, but what does it also mean to be connected? And then I think that moves into whether you're seen, whether you're heard. I think there's great fodder for a season on that. I bet we could fill up 10 episodes, and if not 10, at least 9, leaving room for another fringe episode.
Sure.
A beautiful movie that is not as obscure as the series alone.
Yeah.
But is a Robin Wright film. W-R-I-G-H-T, Wright.
Jenny from Forrest Gump.
Jenny from Forrest Gump. The president's wife in House of Cards. But her movie that she directed and starred in, Land, is absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful in aloneness. It's beautiful in connection and relationship. It's beautiful in loss. It's just so beautiful. And actually, after watching it one time, I bought the movie. I was so moved by it. And so 2021 came out during the pandemic, but she just did an amazing job in that.
And it's based on a true story, or is it?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But it's about a woman who leads a high-profile life, and she buys a property with a broken-down cabin, and is thinking she's going to survive, and then has an instructor, and then is faced with her aloneness, and so very cool. Take a look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, not very high grossing, but if there wasn't a lot of, you're looking at 2021 out of the pandemic where there's not a lot of, moviegoers anyways, right? So.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I think that it was released, I think it, I'm not sure. And it was one of those things where I think I looked into it and thought, oh, I wonder how this plays, and then was just really taken aback on how good of a movie it was.
Yeah, so it looks like you can watch it on HBO, Hulu, and Amazon Prime.
There you go.
So it's out there.
You don't have to buy it.
No.
Yeah. So do it. It's and I think that she directed it and starred in it. It just very well done.
Yeah. Cool. It's a good suggestion. So I was just thinking about so when we talked about going from kind of isolation into community.
Yeah.
And like kind of just the nature of what happens when you get into community. Like, how do you fit into a community?
Wow.
How do you find your identity that you're like, hey, I haven't been a part of this community yet, and I'm trying to figure out like who you are, who I am, right? Identity comes in there, right? I mean, how do you fit in? How do you make yourself, I mean, especially when you're looking at different personality types, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I threw out the word to you about like status, and I think that status looks different to part of a different community, right?
It does.
Right. So I remember this guy, he was talking about, his car, and he drives like a 2013, like, so I mean, nothing flashy car. And he says when he goes out to, and I think he was like some kind of journalist. And he was when he goes to some people's homes to interview, like he'll park around the block because he's kind of embarrassed by the car that he's driving because these people would be different, right?
Right.
And so that status of that, like my vehicle, even fitting into this crowd is going to be different. But then he says he goes to another crowd, and like there's like, people are like, oh, we're concerned about environment, we're concerned about, and having a car that he's, owned now, and it almost is a status symbol of saying, oh yeah, like I'm not buying into
right
the other flashiness. I'm more concerned about this, and people are like, ooh, well, that's cool. Like,
yeah.
So it's just funny how the identity and the status parts are going to change based on what crowd or community that you're a part of.
Yeah.
And so I think, would you say that identity changes then?
Well,
based on those, where you're like, I've got to be this here and this over here, and I've got to try to understand who I am in this group versus this group. I mean, you were talking about work friends, right? And saying, well, this work, at work I can be this, but here I've got to be the, and does that change? Should it change? And I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, and you bring up car.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably take any physical thing that could be acquired,
mm-hmm.
and you could run that around, like run a list of the very same question around it. Like, what about your home? What about the clothes that you wear?
Mm-hmm.
This is going back to a story at Gloria Day, but when I showed up at Gloria Day, I'm coming off of, that was 2009.
Yeah.
The fall of 2009, and it was, gosh, I mean, like probably right now, like 1st of November or something like that. But we were, I mean, just shy of 2 years from the banking debacle,
mm-hmm.
and the balloon, the housing.
Like 2008, is that?
Yeah. The banking crisis,
mm-hmm.
housing bubble was burst, and all of that stuff. I mean, I literally am waiting tables at a mid-level family restaurant. Did not have a beard, The last time I walked into that restaurant with this beard, and I asked the lady who managed, "Hey, would you hire me back?" She's like, "That beard's got to go." So I mean, I think I had a goatee, or I was the 5 o'clock shadow at the time.
Right.
And so like, but it was one of those things where I wore the clothes that I had. And there was a conversation about a raise for me at Gloria Day, and one of the members of the governing board is like, "Well, if we give him this raise, will he wear jeans that don't have holes in them?"
For real?
Yeah. And but it was shortly after that, and in that conversation, you know what? And it was fair. I think it was fair as far as that. I was not aware that people were paying attention. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I was not consumed with the position. And so, there comes this place of, do you serve your role with dignity? Or, are you walking through life with a double flip off towards the position that you hold?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, why are you holding the position?
Yeah, that's funny.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but there I heard for the first time about your work uniform. I'd never considered that. But, we mentioned Apple Computer, 1976, Steve Jobs, and stuff. But when I say Steve Jobs, what do we think about as far as his attire?
Black turtleneck and jeans.
Yeah.
Right, which was his later iteration.
Right. And so so when you're talking about status, sometimes even what we wear is status. So, you got cars, you got houses, you got the clothing and stuff. And quite frankly, I just boiled my, work uniform down into, I moved into never wearing a T-shirt when I was on the platform. But wearing a collared shirt, which at the time they were $19 at Walmart. I wore Dickies. I had black, gray, and navy blue, and so I didn't refine down to a closet full of black shirts. And then, quite frankly, because of my ego, black jeans are more slendering than blue jeans, and they also presented as being more dressed up. But it's still denim. And as long as you kept those washed and cold, but I had a rotation, once the knees started wearing out, because, hey, if you're playing guitar and you're setting up gear, you're going to be on your knees, and so when the knees started wearing out, then I got a new pair of black jeans. But, and it became not only my uniform, but it became my status. People expected me to show up looking like that.
Yeah.
And so, how do you fit in? Well, I think in that situation, I fit in because I was the leader, because of the position I held, and because of whom I gathered around.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about fitting in. But that's not true about every person.
Yeah, so you could be in a position of setting a trend in which people are going to then fit into.
Right.
Right. So trendsetters. But so to me, it always if somebody's like, yeah, I don't believe that I'm about status. I'm not about the status game. And I just think it's false. I think it comes from a place of false, maybe it's false humility, maybe it's false something, but those things matter. Doesn't matter what community or what relation, there's going to be a status that you're trying to be able to play into. And we're trying our best to be able to make sure that's not you're not just trying to fit in. Because that would be, I don't really want this. I don't really care about it, but I've got to play into it. That would be kind of fake, right? I mean, but is it something that we're still trying to figure out.
Well, I think if we're gonna, if I can break it down a little bit, I would break it down into two parts, and that is acceptance and rejection.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, status, or isn't it wanting to be accepted, wanting to be liked by others?
Mm-hmm.
There is a term that I learned back in the day, hypervigilance.
Mm-hmm.
And hypervigilance is the elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats around you. It's often related to trauma,
Yeah.
people with PTSD. But it means feeling highly sensitive to the physical sensations like pain, stress, anxiety, anger, grief, loss, as well as wanting to avoid any socially challenging situations or relationships which bring you into close contact and confrontation with others. But someone who's hypervigilant could have a high level of feeling accepted or rejected, the ability to chameleon yourself, to change into the situation, to give the situation what you think it needs, for some it's to blend in and not to be, on the spot or attention grabbing, and things like that. I think in this whole thing, what I end up doing is I end up pulling from my own experience because it's what I know.
All right.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, I like being a top dog. I mean, like even in serving in, which is really funny that we're even on this topic, because I was gonna like bounce a topic of, I was thinking like B-roll. I was thinking flip sides to albums, like the lesser known songs, or people who, like, there's Johnny Carson and then his sidekick Ed McMahon, right?
Right.
So Jimmy Fallon and Steve, the guy from Des Moines.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, so you got these sidekicks,
Mm-hmm.
and, it's interesting because, there's some people who strive that they want to be the top dog. Now, I've been the top dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also served as the not top dog who's the top of being the sidekicks.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And I found more freedom. Seriously. I mean, and literally, there was more freedom not being the top dog.
Right.
Just being a really good sidekick gives you a lot of wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
And so what about stat? But still, like with me being transparent about my ego, I loved being a top dog sidekick. Still do.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of take on a little bit of the Holy Ghost, and just kind of come in the shadows and be a part of what's going on, and there's parts of where I love being in the limelight. I mean, like when I sing and perform, and I like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's healthy. I mean, it's not driving me right now, but it's one of those things where, like, how do you end up, I think when people say out loud, and I don't know who I'm talking to, I don't mean this to be offensive, okay, but I may be offending people who are listening.
Shit happens.
I think when somebody says, well, status doesn't matter to me,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're talking out loud to convince themselves
Right.
that it really doesn't matter.
And that's what I was trying to get at with it. Is like,
Yeah.
like I mean, even
Yeah.
that is a status that you're going to shoot for. Like people who are saying like, I don't like to be identified in the mainstream. Like that's a status.
Right.
Like you're shooting for something, whether or not you say you're shooting. Like you're trying to say, I'm a nonconformist. There's your status.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be competing within the nonconformist community to be the most nonconformist.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to take every single thing and I'm going to play the contrary. I'm going to always be on the out. Why? Because I need to be a nonconforming person. Right. And so there's even a status there. And that's why I'm saying like these different communities that we're a part of, then we're trying to be able to play the role that we believe will, I think, bring us like that acceptance. And if we can't, then we're going to rebel. You know, so like what's the identity that we can shoot for, right? That we're going to say, yes, this is me. And I'm going to try to be me across community. I mean, isn't that what we should be shooting for? Like our most authentic self. I know authentic gets used and reused, but like, shouldn't we be shooting for that authentic selves? Whether or not it is, yes. I mean, like, and just accepting and believe, like, we are gonna. Like status is going to be something, whether or not it's, you know, what we believe is driving. Like we know that there's going to be this undertow. Maybe it's overt, maybe it's covert. I don't know. But there's definitely things at play in everything, whether it's your workplace and you're like, hey, like I want to be the one known for X.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I may not be top earner, but I do want to be known as whatever.
Yeah.
Like, because then you're known.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be unknown.
See, and that's what that's where I boil into acceptance versus rejection. Known, unknown, heard, unheard. And I flip that with the person that when you talk, somebody listens.
Yeah.
You know, but part of being someone who talks that people listen to is not talking all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure, based on this podcast, people are like, you guys can talk forever.
We could too.
Yeah, and we have.
Right.
As a very good point. It's funny because, yeah, when you, I maybe a psychologist or psychiatrist would be able to, you know, like speak more intelligently in this than either you or I.
Sure.
But within humanity,
well, we don't deny
I mean
that. So
no. But what drives that? I would come back to that if somebody sees themselves and like maybe the question is to ask what is the status you're looking for? And you talked about, you know, our authentic self and what does that mean? I think caretakers get into taking care of other people instead of themselves. And then they're, you know, they look in the mirror and they're like, man, how come I'm not taking care of me? And so there's got to be a reversion or a reiteration to come back to those healthy practices. And oftentimes it means you can't be taking care of others while you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I would also go to the place of a status that may have mattered to you as a 13-year-old
Mm-hmm.
could be a lot different status to you as a 23-year-old. The status that was important at 23 could be a lot different at 33.
Right.
The 33-year-old you, if you could go back and tell the 33-year-old you,
Mm-hmm.
Hey, the priorities that you have, hey, good job, you're doing good. versus the 43-year-old you, 43 to 53. And my point of using those numbers is decades at a time, there's evolution of ourselves. And so then statuses change too.
Right.
And where what we find is important changes. And the realization of what it takes for what you really want moves in a different direction. And I know that when, back in my 30s and 40s, provision for my children was a major driver. And so, what did it take to make money to be able to physically take care of my children in a provisional sense, where, now, there are different, because of their responsibility in their own lives, there are different priorities or drivers in my life. So, other thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking even another aspect of this status part is social media.
Oh,
right. I mean, is the image that you put out is the status, or it's the how many likes or how many your retweets or how many this, how many that, right? So what's the status of a social media, right? Because influencers can be a job, right? So
it can,
right? I mean, these people who get a ton of followers then end up becoming an influencer, and they get paid to do that.
Well, and I mean, they're actually offering classes in college now to be an influencer.
That's crazy.
That can be
right.
That can be your emphasis.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember now that Elon Musk is officially the owner of Twitter.
Did you say he was the Antichrist?
I don't even know what he is, but
yeah.
But what we do know is that, so what he started doing on Twitter now is hey, so on Twitter there's a blue check that's supposed to be able to verify this celebrity or this influencer is who they are.
Yeah.
Because there were people who had started fake pages for people and then started, taking advantage of that. And so then there was hey, is there something that we can verify who this is? So there would be the blue check.
Yeah.
Well, now Elon comes in and says, hey, I'm thinking $20 a month for you to keep your verification. And he floats it. People are in an uproar. They're like, this wasn't the reason for it. It's not status. But is it?
Huh.
Is it? I mean, I know that there were people who were trying to chase the blue check as a way in which they can say, hey, I've got lots of followers. I've got the blue check. You're saying.
Wow.
So, and what I think he's trying to be able to show is is this a status symbol for you? And if it is, pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's I mean, and it looks like only about 25% of the influencers on Twitter would be willing to pay for their verification. They're yeah, we don't want it. And so Twitter had already turned into, they had offered, plans that were going to cost money. So you could be a part of the Twitter Blue, which was ad free, and there, you could undo your tweets or delete your tweets, or maybe edit your tweets, because you can delete it right now. But it's for additional things, we're going to charge you for it. But this one kind of leads to a different discussion, not just paying for the social media, but paying for the status. And I bet you there are plenty of people who would say, I'd like to pay for status.
Sure.
Because then it's that just means I'm going to plan to make sure I have the status that I want.
So just to help our listeners understand,
Yeah.
With a little bit of research, there's over 400,000 blue checks on the Twitterverse.
Yeah.
At $20 a month, Elon, if everyone came in and paid the $20, Elon would bring in $8.4 million per month just with that move. How much did he pay for Twitter?
44 billion?
Yeah, it would take a while to get to that, but that's a really healthy way to start recapping what you invested.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and if you're looking at it, I mean, Twitter already has an income stream for ads.
Right.
Right? So if you're on Twitter and your feed is already going to be built in with ads. So like those companies are paying for ad space.
Okay.
So he's already, like Twitter already generates income.
Right.
And so so when you're looking at this is just a slice of the pie that he's trying to be able to say, hey, like, this is a business. I'm not going to, this is not just a space anymore for conversation or news or whatever.
Right.
Like this is a business, and I'm going to look at it as a business.
I remember listening to Science Mike. He remembers Twitter when Twitter was a text thing, before it was on a social media platform, and stuff like that. And you only had so many characters and all this other stuff.
I think it was 150 at the time.
120?
This could be 120
characters. Yeah. So anyway, status, man. I mean, that still goes back to recognizing what season you're in. And some people, want to have status, all the way up the ladder. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think that there's so many things that I don't think that we take into consideration very much, that why this? And there's a lot of things that I think status does drive us to.
Yeah.
Even consumering, right? Consumerism, right?
Yeah.
And what are the things that we're buying?
Sure.
This is also going to have to do with status. So if you're shooting for the phone, right? I mean, half of the world owns iPhones.
Right.
Right. Over half the world owns an iPhone.
Right.
So you're looking at it and saying, so for status, I mean, and this would even be, if you hear about the text chains, right? Where you get multiple people in a text chain, and you're and you can always tell there's somebody, why is this text chain green versus blue? Because somebody doesn't own an iPhone.
Right.
And then they get singled out.
Yeah.
Who's turning our text chain green? Go get an iPhone, right? There's even that's a part of that fitting in section of things, you don't want to be green, you want to be blue.
Yeah. This is removed from the world that I live in. Yeah. I mean, the people that I know that don't have iPhones are usually geeks because they like the Android OS so that they can make other changes and do other things.
Right, because it's more of an open system.
Right. Me personally, I like an iPhone because I don't have to geek about it,
Well, I mean, and to me, when you're dealing with an open system, it also means, with being able to tinker and all that other, it means that there's people who can do that and hack.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why it originally was the place where there would be lots of viruses that were spread through that system because it was open.
Yeah.
Apple's we're going to close it because we think it's going to be more secure. Now, I'm not saying it's unhackable or it's not, but they do catch things more in a closed system versus an open system.
Yeah.
So, But that's the same thing in a group, right? In a community. Like, we're going to spot you if you're not part of us.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to see it because this is a closed system. Oh,
Wow.
man. Yeah.
That's crazy. Status. Yeah. I mean, I just think that there's a continual tow within humanity that being accepted versus being rejected is a part of the human makeup. I don't think people get away from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. So what status are you trying to chase that you're unaware of? Are you trying to be able to see some kind of identity? You know, you're like, that's what I want to be. Well, guess what? The statuses are going to be a part of that, and you're going to be chasing it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking at it, be realistic. Don't claim to be a nonconformist and not chasing anything when you're actually chasing nonconformity.
Yeah. So we started watching Madam Secretary again.
Yeah.
Just, closing down the night in the evening. And they both, Madam Secretary and her husband, their son, who's the youngest, is their personal anarchist. And he plays that role. But anarchy is a society without a government. And it just cracks me up because without a government, he couldn't be an anarchist. And they make jokes about it through the whole show,
Right.
and stuff like that. I think what you're tipping into is the wiring of the human brain. Culturally, I think there's some dualism, involved in that. There's definitely tribalism, is a big part of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it makes me want to study the Stoics more.
It could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was an example of, there was like a young mom who was finding her community, and then she found a group of other young moms. Well, they also happened to be young moms who were anti-vax, like not just like the COVID vax, like any vax.
Oh yeah.
Right? So there was a community, and so she's like, well, now I've become vaccine questionable, right? So like I'm still questioning it, but she knew that she wasn't going to be able to be fully accepted into this community until she got to a place of saying I'm anti.
Yeah.
Like they would still hold her kind of outside of the community in all aspects of their relationship.
Yeah.
Until she was a part of like, you got to do this or be this or think this way in order to be a part of this. And so like even those things, they can lead us to, you're like, hey, I'm a free thinker and I'm going to do my own research. Like, but that is even something that's playing in the background.
Oh yeah.
Like it's leading you, like I want to be a part of this group, this community, this, like I have some connections.
Yeah.
So like that's also going to play, like and it does for all of us.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think it's something that if we identify and start to see, like how is it leading me to make the decisions and the choices right now? It does.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think that might be something to be able to leave with people today.
Well, and what I recognize in that where we're at, we may pick this conversation up because there's a lot that's been posed I don't think what we've given our listener to this point on the episode is, what do I do when I recognize those internal drives, and like how do I come back to, or how, you know, like, what if I've lost myself in the pursuit of status? How do I find myself again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really haven't dug into it. Ultimately, what we've said is like, hey, let's open this box and actually figure out that there is this thing, and let's identify it and see it. We haven't figured out how to navigate it yet. We haven't tried to figure out, all right, I've been chasing this thing I don't want to.
Right.
How do you, and so we haven't talked about that. So it is something to come back to and revisit.
I really think that the scope of this topic deserves some more attention. And you know, I mean, just, you know, from a Lutheran perspective of faith, you know, I just come back to this may be an episode that people would recognize as a confession episode, a confession into discovery, and saying, hey, we can see this in ourselves, and we can see it happening around us. And it's more of an awakening call. Very prophetic of you.
Prophetic.
Yeah.
It's fun. That's a status symbol.
You are. The skeptical prophet.
Right.
His name's Phil.
No, we've just been adding some terms now this season.
Yeah, the skeptical prophet. You know, and I guess with us wrapping up and finishing off for this episode, what I would just say is, hey, don't jump off a cliff. You know, don't if you feel like you're in a well, take a deep breath, and, you know, take a breath and breathe out, and you know, just catch us on the next episode, and we'll follow through with that.
There we go.
So
follow through with us.
Yeah, and we will dive more into the masquerade of what drives us.
Yeah, it's varied. It's big.
Yeah. It just goes back to that whole part of, what does it mean when I recognize that within me I'm hiding behind the costume that I'm portraying to others.
Yep. Just like Steve, weaving everything back around with even how we ended the last episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I see it as a thread that developed off of that, and then, you know, you brought up the topic, and we're coming back to it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll be back next week, and we look forward to more. And if you have some thoughts about it, since we are going to say we're going to continue the topic, if you have thoughts that you would like to interject, feel free to send them.
Yeah.
Right? Cut daisies and unicorns at gmail.com. Cut daisy. It's the whole thing, right?
You don't want to be at yahoo.com.
No,
it's Gmail.
Gmail.
Us and the Googs.
Cut daisies and unicorns at gmail.com.
All right.
Not Yahoo.
Yahoo! Have a great Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever day of the week it is. And if you're listening from Mars or any other intergalactic sphere, enjoy whatever your calendar looks like.
Whatever it might be.
But we're definitely sending it out there to the universe.